Good morning, dear listeners. You are listening live on 100.1 FM in Lusaka and the surrounding areas. Welcome to another interesting edition of City Voices. I am your host. My name is Makwingo Itia. Today on the show, I'm so happy to host United Party for National Development, UPND Media Director, Mr. Mark Simuuwe, and our topic of discussion is UPND's preparations for the 2026 general elections. Mr. Simuuwe, good morning.
Thank you very much, Litia, and a very good morning to our dear listeners.
How are you?
Fantastic, and how is Zamcom Radio?
Oh no, we are fine. And before we even go much into our conversation, Mr. Simuuwe, it is your first time to be here on Zamcom Radio. How are you finding our beautiful studios here?
No, it's quite magnificent and quite spacious. It has a lot of features of a standard professional radio station.
Okay.
And I'm happy to be here. It's cool.
Okay.
And we were just reading about it when it was running previously with our national studios. So it's good to be here.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, let's start our conversation, Mr. Simuuwe. And let's talk about what is trending on most the pages on social media. Before we even talk about the UPND, let's talk about the President Hakainde Hichilema's recent visit to Tanzania, and in which some quotas have condemned, knowing the fact that it was a disputed election where it is also alleged that some people were killed. What is your comment as a party with regards to the president's decision to be part of the inauguration ceremony of President Hassan?
Thank you very much. I should mention from the beginning that this was an invitation to the inauguration ceremony. Yes. As the general practice is. You may wish to know that even in Zambia, when we had the disputed election in 2016, we had the heads of state that came here. Amid the political party that ran the country with so much bloodshed, with machetes, with Lawrence Banda gone, with Nsamansa gone, with Joseph Kaunda gone, such that there was even a report from the UN on violation of human rights, especially extrajudicial killings. When you look at the European Union Election Observation Mission report, it was very much instructive with regard to the declining political space at the time. But even when we had all these things, we had the heads of state who came to the inauguration ceremony of Edgar Lungu. And today, the people that are condemning President HH for going to attend an inauguration ceremony were actually sounding ululations at the Heroes Stadium. I should indicate also that there were many other heads of state that were in attendance, and President HH was picked particularly to represent a number of heads of state so that he could actually give a position of a very important speech. I should also indicate that even if there were cases of violence, deaths recorded before, during, and perhaps post-election of Tanzania, there are institutions which have been established by legislation, which legitimized the election and announced the winner. So once that has been done by a sovereign state, nothing deters another country from attending such a very important function. You need to also contextualize matters by admitting that it was not a coup d'etat that took place in Tanzania. It was an election. It is different from a situation where there is a military takeover and then the head of state goes to support the military takeover. That creates a different environment altogether. But under the circumstances, we are consoled by the fact that perhaps those that were criticizing his going to that particular area have short memories that their hands are blood-stained in Zambia. Lawrence Banda is no more. Mapens Chigulo is no more. Kaunda is no more. Samansama is no more. You have Visit Kasongoso no more. You have also another UNZA student no more. Okay. Shimujila and many others. So let me quickly narrow it down to how we view our relationship with Tanzania away from this particular visit and away from the social media criticism. To Zambia, Tanzania is a very critical partner, understanding that on an annual basis, over $1 billion goes there in terms of exports, starting from food. And today, because we now are able to produce fertilizer, we are exporting fertilizer to Tanzania. Secondly, we have the Tazama pipeline, which particular facility is jointly owned by the two countries. Then you have Tazara. There is Zambia, and the other part, Tanzania, and the other part, Zambia. A combination of the two.
Yes.
This is a very important route to the sea. In other words, this is the only country where Zambia co-owns a route to the sea with Tanzania. While these other routes to the sea are important, this comes with a unique feature. Even when it comes to the rehabilitation of the facility, the Zambian government cannot unanimously or unilaterally deal with the matter. You need the Tanzanian government. That's why when the president, during FOCAC, visited China, President HH, we had President Samia being a party to the signatories, putting pen to paper, agreeing with China that China will rehabilitate the railway line, they will put up a new line, they will bring new wagons to bring life to Tazara. And the workers that you find there are paid partly by the Zambian government and our counterparts. Now, imagine if there was instability in Tanzania. You'll have no fuel because you have a pipeline which will definitely be damaged. You will not be able to access the sea because many of our brothers and sisters who are doing cross-border trading survive on such places. What you call Nakonde rice. Nakonde does not plant rice. That rice comes from Mbeya. But we call it Nakonde rice because that's where you buy it from, where we border Tanzania through Tunduma. And this is a country whose relationship with Zambia we have cherished for many years, that we have a one border post. When you cross into Tunduma, you cannot tell whether you're in Zambia or you're in Tanzania because you just walk through. You can sleep there and eat and come back. We are beyond brothers, in addition to the exports that we can talk about. But that does not extinguish the fact that there should be no one who should die. And the president was very categorical that violence breeds violence. We can never cherish violence anywhere, whether practiced by our neighbor or practiced by our country. And this is why he continues to say, instability anywhere is instability everywhere. And this clarion call was also to the opposition. He never just addressed the counterpart. By giving himself as an example that he lost many times in Zambia. He had the temptation of taking to the street, but he restrained his supporters. He had the temptation of taking to the street the time that he was incarcerated for more than 90 days. 427 days. Arrested for more than 15 times. The only opposition at the time to have undergone through that kind of treatment. He had the temptation to use shortcuts. But oftentimes he called for calm. And he said God's time is the best. And that is the wise message that we need to give Tanzanians today. To appeal to the opposition that things may not happen accordingly. And he gave himself as an example. At least he was privileged among many other heads of state that were in attendance. They believed HH had the best message. To date, if you go to neighboring countries, they still talk about his arrest. They are wondering that he was arrested, but then he didn't take time to deal with his enemies, according to what they believe they are.
Okay,
yeah.
Mr. Simuuwe, sorry to cut you short. If I've gotten you correctly, you've based your argument on the economic ties and the benefits that Zambia share with Tanzania. But your critics suggest that on moral grounds, that visit was supposed to be avoided. So what's your take on that?
First of all, they're talking about morality. On moral grounds, the president should have gone there. When your neighbor's house is on fire and they are fighting, it is your moral obligation to intervene. So they are too immoral to understand what is going on in Tanzania. It is the other way around, my brother. It is immoral for us to keep quiet when our neighbor's house is on fire. Were there no cause on the Zambian government when there was a near punch between DRC and Rwanda? We hosted Paul Kagame here. We hosted President Tshisekedi here. The two have been fighting. So, it is immoral for the critics to stay quiet. Because, you see, what they do not like is the fact that it was a successful trip. And there was wisdom in what the president said. Because they are opportunists. They celebrate when there is a confusion. If President Church never went there, they could have been the first ones to make noise. You remember that President Church one time decided to send a representative at the UN General Assembly. They raised the red flag. They are asking, why didn't he go this side? We have never been absent from any of the regional inaugurations of presidents. We've always either had representatives or the president himself has gone there. Okay. So, we can safely indicate that we do not have opposition. That's why they are not raising real issues. What they are raising are immoral issues, not moral issues.
Okay, to our dear listeners, if you are just joining us, you are listening to City Voices here on Zamcom Radio. And my guest during the morning is United Party for National Development, UPND Media Director, Mr. Mark Simuuwe. And our topic of discussion is the UPND's preparations for the 2026 general elections. And later I will open phone lines. You'll be calling us on 0978 640018. 0978 640018, or if you have you can also send a message on WhatsApp on the same number 0978 640018, and my guest will be able to respond to your question. Mr. Simuuwe, let's talk about the constitutional amendment process that is going on. So as a party in power, there is a constitutional amendment process going on. What is your view on the ongoing deliberations to amend the constitution?
They are timely and properly before the people of Zambia, especially also given the judgment of the Constitutional Court that called for the need for more engagement. And the beauty with the whole process is that we are within the constitutional mandate to ensure that the Constitution of Zambia is amended. It is one of the issues that the UPND government promised the people of Zambia when we were in the opposition, that we need to deal with the constitution. And one of the issues that the president raised was that many clauses are quarreling amongst themselves. And those clauses that are not straight, they must be made straight. And for avoidance of doubt, I want to say that most of the areas that are controversial in the eyes of some individuals, for example, the stay of ministers in parliament after dissolution of parliament. I mean, after, about 60 days, 90 days before the elections. You remember that President ECL had said that the Constitution allowed them to remain in office.
Yes.
Okay? I mean, the ministers, not the MPs. Allowed ministers to remain in office after dissolution of parliament. But then the Constitutional Court translated the Constitution differently and said they needed to dissolve. And there was an order to ensure that they pay back what they got. Yes. What that demonstrates is that the drafters of the Constitution did not foresee that gap, such that it made the people that read to be at variance in terms of what was intended with regard to whether ministers needed to stay in office after dissolution of parliament. Now, so what you do when you have case law, because case law is subject to being overturned using different legal processes, you simply codify the judgment into legislation. And what are we doing? You will now take advantage of this particular process. I'm giving that as an example. To codify by ensuring that now the Constitution is expressly providing for the fact that after dissolution of parliament, ministers must vacate office. Secondly, there is another judgment by the same court on nominations, on what happens where a candidate who has filed in nominations dies, resigns,
Yes.
What happens? The court again ruled that they have to call for fresh nominations. So we have to codify the judgment into written legislation. So what are we saying? We are saying we want to agree with the court by getting the provisions that if we have to go for elections every time someone dies, then it poses a threat on ourselves. Because Article 52 affects even many other positions. Councillor, council chairperson, mayor, member of parliament, and president. So if that be the case, the fear that we should have, all of us, is that instead of creating a constitutional crisis, and what is the constitutional crisis? Should we go for the general elections? Then one of the presidential candidates, after filing in nominations, decide to withdraw. It means the ECZ will have to call for fresh nominations at presidential level only. The rest of the elections will go ahead. And those nominations and elections must be held for presidential, for presidents, only within 90 days. Now, the difficulty that we have with that judgment from the court is that it did not state how many times individuals or candidates can withdraw from their nomination. God forbid, within 90 days, if another candidate dies, then you have to call for fresh nominations again within 90 days. Then the question that you need to ask yourself is, meanwhile, you will have members of parliament who will have been elected, and they have to be sworn in. And they have to be sworn in by the new speaker. After that has been done, sitting must commence. But they will not be paid because the budget cannot be passed. There will be no ministers. Because ministers will have vacated office. They can't be paid, meaning the national budget for 2026 cannot be passed. If colleagues want, they can continue withdrawing nominations up to December. Meaning no civil servant can be paid. There can be no recruitment. There can be no expenditure anywhere. That's what it means. Because there is no executive to take the budget to parliament. There will be no minister of finance to take the national budget to parliament during that period. Unless the court ruled that, hope you're following it here.
Yes.
Unless the court ruled that, they can only be allowed to withdraw 2 times. Unfortunately, in the judgment, there is no limit to withdrawing nominations. Now, we see that as a danger, as a constitutional crisis. That if people who do not mean well decide that they make the government ungovernable, they can continue withdrawing. That's why the president said, this constitution we have can make a president be a perpetual president. In other words, when these people will be withdrawing, President HH will still remain president. I'm sure I've simplified. I've attended to this with all simplicity.
Yes.
In a manner that listeners can get.
Yes.
Now, this is just one case in point. The second one, which is very important, is that delimitation constitutionally, according to the Constitution,
Yes.
is supposed to take place every after 10 years. That is why our colleagues before UPND came into leadership decided to start the process in 2019. Because it is statute bound. Failure to delimitate now will amount to violation of the Constitution. Delimitation is not a UPND proposal. Delimitation is a constitutional provision which should be undertaken every after 10 years. And the reason the drafters came up with that every after 10 years is understandably, how often should we conduct census in the country? After every
10 years.
Now, if that's the case, my brother, it means the population is growing. And for us to know what percentage of the population is taking part in elections, we need to know the national population. We need to have the census.
Yes. But
Otherwise, you are going to have a problem. There is no, because right now the question is who will have violated the Constitution in the first place, if at all the issue of delimitation does not go. And the undertaking is presided over by the Electoral Commission of Zambia, who have that constitutional mandate of presiding over the process. And that's why at some point Luwinda was asking for a report for 2019, which they produced themselves. And then they said, yes, we have the report, which you did. Now, the challenge that we have today is that they believe it is only themselves who could have done it in 2019 and not the new government.
I think, Mr. Simuuwe, the argument from one of your critics, they've talked about the timing of the constitutional amendments. They are saying it is too close to elections, and some even suggest that the constitutional amendment can even be done after the elections. So don't you think, since it is close to the elections, does it not attempt the well-intended reforms?
Now, my brother, let me say this. There is no such a thing as timing in the Constitution. There is no such a phrase. The constitutional mandate for making laws ranges from the time members of parliament begin their first sitting up to dissolution of parliament. In other words, we are within the constitutional mandate. When the critics ask you that question, tell us a provision in the Constitution which says you cannot amend the Constitution immediately after the election. They will not give you a provision in the Constitution. Now, in case you've forgotten, UNIP amended the Constitution about 3 times. MMD amended the Constitution 2 times. PF amended the Constitution once. They could have amended it twice had the Bill 10 gone through. Now, it does not mean that every party should amend the Constitution. Part of the attributes of a good legal system is that the law must change according to changing society. Now, here we are. I've demonstrated to you why there is need for us to make amendments. And these amendments are not controversial. When they say, no, it is too close to the election, what is the fear? Because even after the elections, the ones who will be amending the Constitution are politicians. It does not change the players. It is the same body that will amend the Constitution, which is the legislature.
Maybe with timing, even wide consultation with all the stakeholders.
The question is, how long does it take for wide consultation to be done? Let me give you an example. In 1991, for the 1991 Constitution, a committee was set up in 1990. A few months later, in August, we had a new Constitution. And that 1991 was an election year, because KK had to cut short his term and called for early elections. So we had to amend the Constitution to allow for multi-party democracy elections to take place. Perhaps you were still very young or not born yet that time. But the point is, we had a one-party participatory constitution. It did not allow us to go for elections in the manner we had elections in 1991. So KK and his team decided to push for an amendment a few months before the elections to allow for us to revert to multi-party democracy.
Okay, thank you so much. To our dear listeners.
Now, when Chiluba came in 1991, he succeeded in the whole process. By August, we had the Constitution. It was an election year, a few months before elections. In 1996, Chiluba and his team decided to amend the Constitution to allow for the parentage clause. That was, of course, for many critics, intended to bar KK from contesting. In 1996, we went for general elections. Initially, they were called tripartite elections, because it was local government, parliamentary, and presidential. Trio. Now it's general because we have introduced other contestable positions. Now, in 2020, that was in 1996.
Yes.
In 2016, the constitution that we are using was passed in the election year in 2016. That's why there was a problem of whether ministers needed to stay in parliament, because it was barely a month or two before the debate on stay of ministers after dissolution of parliament erupted. So using the constitution which was enacted in the election year. So the critics that you're calling critics today, they enacted the constitution in the election year. Today they have acquired new brains. They are saying it is too close to the election. Is that normal? In 2021, they almost amended the constitution again, close to the election year. The same critics you are referring to. That's Bill 10. Close to the election year, they wanted to amend the constitution using Bill 10. The same people today, we wanted to have this constitutional amendment done almost 2 years before the election. They have been fighting the process from the time immemorial. Within many months, over a year before the election. And they are the ones that, including the civil society organizations, who said, let us defer the bill. This particular document could have gone through over 6 months ago. They went to stop the process, meaning we could have had the constitution over 1 year before the election. Over 1 year before the election. Here we are. They said, no, you defer it. You still have time. What is the rush? After deferring it, then they have changed their corpus. They are saying, no, can you withdraw it completely? Then what do they want to achieve? So our point is that they don't mean well. One of the things that they are scared of is, number one, they know that the idea of youth inclusion in the National Assembly will be a big blow to the opposition. They believe UPND will get merits out of it, number one, because no government has ever done that. Number two, they believe that the inclusion of women will be a successful story for the UPND government, because no government has done that. It will be the first time we're doing that. They believe the inclusion of persons living with disabilities will be a blow on the opposition. Now, it should not be an issue of having a political lens. We need to have a bigger picture, that we need these persons to be part of the legislative process, part of the decision-making decisions. And this is why we are calling upon many youths across the country to support the initiative. Because the constitution that will be enacted will not be the UPND constitution. The constitution that will be undergoing amendment, it will be a national constitution, which will live beyond UPND. Meaning UPND someday will go, but then the constitution will remain.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Simuuwe. Let's also talk about the ongoing voter registration. As a party, have you set up deliberate measures to encourage potential members and also people that are eligible to vote so that they go and register and vote?
Well, it's not even a question of whether as a party we have to do it. It's the responsibility of all of us as citizens, regardless of which political party we are affiliated to. I should mention that it's part of what we should consider as an obligation, including Litia, including the media. I remember many years ago, we would be playing public announcements for free to ask people to go and register in the media. Of course, today, due to certain reasons, some of those can only run when they've been paid for. But previously, those could be taken as a public obligation, as were part of the roles that the media needed to play. Because the media is accountable to the public as a fourth estate, in addition to the 3 existing organs of the state.
Okay. So do you think enough has been done to make sure that people register to vote?
This is a question that we need to ask. On the part of the ECZ, they are only an entity that presides over the electoral process. The platform for information dissemination is the media. Perhaps the question now should be rephrased and say, to what extent has the media played a role in informing members of the public? Because part of the role of the media is to educate, is to inform. So if ECZ has to inform people, has the media provided that platform? And if they have provided the platform, at what cost? And in the absence of them being paid, have they taken the responsibility to take it as a societal obligation, to see to it members of the public are not deprived of the opportunity to play their civic role, to choose leaders of their choice? So I should mention that the Electoral Commission of Zambia may have done their part, but in the digital age of evolved media, it is important for us to mention that all platforms that are identified for information dissemination must be seized as an opportunity. Zamcom has to play a role. Public media must play even a more critical role. Above all, a door-to-door campaign, which some of us have taken as an initiative, including the UPND. If you go to some of the places in the country, especially those remote areas, you discover that the distance to the place where they vote from, some of them have to cover more than 10 kilometers. Remember in the Eastern Province where we were having a by-election, was it more than 10, more than 20 kilometers? These are villagers that don't drive. They don't have bicycles. Now, who is going to take responsibility and provide that kind of transport so that those people can play a role in their governance system? So that's why it is the job of everybody. The ECZ are doing all they can. They have announced the extension period for voter registration. And perhaps I want to take advantage of this platform to indicate, especially to the students, that it is immaterial where you go to register from. If you want to vote from Chingola, you can, and then you're a student, for example, at Zamcom. Assuming Zamcom is a center, is it?
Yes.
Is it a center? Or maybe it's a center, maybe in Skanze, maybe at the school Kabwata. If at all Zamcom would want to go, Zamcom students would want to vote, and they realize that the time elections will be taking place, maybe Zamcom calendar will mean that students will be on recess or vacation.
Yes.
It is possible that students can still register from Skanze and vote from where they come from. In other words, you can register from anywhere. All you need to do is to indicate your polling station where you're going to vote from. That information is very important. I want to emphasize and repeat that you can register from anywhere so long you put the area you want to vote from.
Yes.
And this is the information that students must be given. A student from the University of Zambia yesterday called me expressing concern that the university is closed now. Students have no opportunity to register. But then in August, during the elections, students will be in school. What will happen? So I told him that it is a historic issue. Even at our time, those concerns were emerging. So I told them that right now, you don't need to have the university open or closed for you to vote. Wherever the students are, if they are home, they can register home to vote from the University of Zambia, sports hall. All they need to do is to indicate the polling station, Unza Sports Hall, as a polling station. So I wanted to take advantage of this particular platform to just clarify this very important point, including to those that are listening to this radio, that let them go and register to vote. You heard the ECZ you are capturing, it's a huge number. And the statistics are not quite impressive. And normally in Zambia, we have a tendency of doing things at the very 11th hour. I've heard people say, no, let them extend the period. But even after they have announced the extension, you'll be amazed that when you step to these polling stations, you find these workers that are registering voters seated alone. People are not just going there to vote. So we really need to step up our effort as individuals and as Zambians. Not only as political parties, but as Zambian citizens. It's our obligation to ensure that we do that. And being a politician, I also want to take advantage of this platform to invite those that are registering for the first time, because in 2021, Mr. James Sakala, a number of them did not know about the UPND manifesto. They have come to know it because some of them were in school. They are now associating free education with UPND. They are associating meal allowances with UPND. They are associating with employment of thousands of youth on an annual basis with UPND. They are associating cash for work with UPND. They are associating sponsorship of youths across the country using vocational training colleges, including resource centers, all the 23 resource centers, with 200,000 youths so far trained for free by government across the country, as at last year. 200,000 youths for free. I had time to talk to some youths when I was in Kenya, in Nairobi. You know, I was telling them that you are destroying your own country. You can't go into parliament and start breaking property there. They said, Mr. Mark, you know, our president, you know, promised us so many things. He has not done it. He promised us jobs and so on. Then in my conversation with them, I told them that, by the way, in Zambia, we have recruited over 30,000 teachers. They said, you see? Then I told them that in Zambia, we have gotten money from the central government. Now, at that time, we were 28. We are now at over 28,000. And then we had to calculate equivalent to Kenyan shilling. They say, you see? You see? Now we have revamped the mining sector. We are doing data restructuring. And you see? Now, I realized that when they were saying, you see, they were sending a message to me that there are certain things, in fact, many things that are happening in Zambia, which you can't see in the neighboring countries. Such that some neighboring countries have even become spectators. They are checking what's happening in Zambia. That's why we had a delegation of officials flying from Namibia to come and see our own homegrown economic model of using CDF to turn around the economy by allowing citizens to spend the money on their own and not wait for the central government. And this is why, at the close of the year, immediately the year is closed, we are announcing paying CDF in full in all constituencies. Now, today, as we speak, Zambia is back as one of the net exporters of so many consumables in the region. We are now exporting fertilizer. We are now exporting batteries to 8 countries. We are now exporting electric wires again, in addition to Zamefa. Just from Chibombo here, we will now delve into making our own medicine. Pharmaceuticals now will start manufacturing medicine. You heard the industrial yards where the president was commissioning projects there. We are now producing, having one of the biggest manufacturers of starch and glucose, which was recently in Lusaka South commissioned. We are now producing our own steel to satisfy our competitive market within. This is why in the national budget for 2026, the minister said, in fact, there will be tariffs imposed on imported steel, including PVC pipes, because we are now manufacturing those things for local consumption. What it means is that, in addition, we are nearing to a point of sponsoring or supporting our own national budget locally. We are now above 80. It's not a joke. In 3 years, my brother, for a country that was highly indebted, for a country highly indebted, I'm saying highly indebted. Many countries in the region are still highly indebted, but do you know what we've done? Zambia is the only country under the G20 framework to have succeeded in debt restructuring. Right now, there is no other country that is coming. A number of them are asking, how did you do it? We have crossed past that stage. And now we are at the level where every time you see the president on camera, he's talking, either he's commissioning a project or he's talking about what we have done. I was telling one minister 2 days ago that, look, we are so choked as a media team that you cannot discuss all our achievements in one sitting or one interview. It's impossible. I even told him that I am now looking for a speaker, the whole government, who can discuss all our achievements in one interview. I will not find one. I'm sure Zamcom Radio has attended one of the press conferences that we have established, where we are featuring members of parliament to tell us what has been done in their constituencies. You agree with me that just one constituency is a mouthful, such that even journalists started murmuring that this is too long. That's one constituency. Now, which speaker, no matter how sharp their tongue is, can preempt all the achievements that we have realized in one city?
Okay,
now,
thank you so much, Mr. Simuuwe. To our dear listeners, if you're just joining us, you're listening to City Voices here on Zamcom Radio, and my guest is United Party for National Development UPND Media Director, Mr. Mark Simuuwe. Our topic of discussion is UPND's preparations for the 2026 general elections. If you want to get in touch with us, dear listeners, you can call us on 0978 640018. 0978 640018. I think we have a caller. Hello, you are through to Zamcom Radio. Your name and where you are calling us from? Yes, this is Litia on Zamcom Radio. Honorable. Okay, Mr. Mkosa, you can go ahead.
Morning, Mr. Mkosa.
Thank the president, or to commend the president for the attendance, the inauguration he attended, the president elect of the Republic of Tanzania, because he showed that really Tanzania is not just a neighbor; it's our business partner. Most of the things that we use as a country, most especially those that drive our economy, coming from there or passing through that country. So there was no need to listen to people that don't mean well or what do they see in whatever the government and the president does. It's a negative. Coming to the issue of Bill 7, I think we need also to remind ourselves that we are a democratic country. And in a democratic country, there's nothing that will be agreed upon 100%. Automatically, there will be people that will be against it. And what we just need to do as a nation is to do what is right. Looking at the proposed process, to me, after listening to all the people that are against these amendments, there's no one who has told me or indicated which cause is bad. All what they are talking about is timing, which they cannot even explain why they are saying the timing is bad. Because if really they are saying there is no time between now and the election time, let us start now.
So in conclusion, Mr. Mkosa.
That conclude. The problem we have as a country now, the biggest problem we have is that we don't have a credible opposition political parties or leaders that are giving us credible checks and balances. All what they do, they use emotions and they say things which they don't even understand. That's why today they will go and support Mnangagwa or attend the inauguration of Mnangagwa there, which which Sadiq somehow said the elections was not free and fair, but today they want to say no because Sadiq said this, so the president was not supposed to attend the inauguration of the president of Tanzania.
Okay.
That was kind of.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mkosa. Thank you so much, Mr. Mkosa. To our dear listeners, if you want to get in touch with us, you can call us on 0978 64 0018. 0978 64 0018. You can also send us a message on, I think we have a call. Hello, good morning. You are through to Zamcom Radio. Your name and where you're calling us from? Vanda Nzina. For Okaba Fraser, you can go ahead.
Tauka Sugarade, Moka.
Nanga pali manja wataona bwani hii ni adika za mapenda kumbule kwa kutenda kama kuikei marake zelayo na kote hizi yondipani na mpali manja kama yaki mwendelezewe mwendele kwa ule kwa uti kote hizi ya zaka mwamba hili marake mawana wa mtipa makonsuwe za mcheke yeo mkama hiyo mkina nikaa ameni unapata madhambi yao kama kiende kile ndio kitu kile niende kile mtani yeye pia yangu mtani kile kama mtaje mapepo ya kitu na mtu mtani ni kwamba mauti yao ni maneno ni ngapi mauti ndio president wanatanga mtu anatanga wanatakiwa saende tanga badao sasa ndio kitu tunatangeka mauti tunatangeka mpaka plani kama wali ndivyo wanadora wanapote maona basi watu na wakati mayuti ndio kama kitu tunafanya right now sasa ila mwenye
Okay, I think thank you so much, Mr. Fraser. I want to accommodate as many callers as we can. Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Fraser. If you want to get in touch, dear listeners, you can call us on 0978 64 0018. 0978 64 0018, or can also send us a message on WhatsApp on the same number 0978 64 0018, and my guest will be able to respond to your question. You can respond, Mr. Simuuwe.
Thank you very much. This is a very good question from Mr. Fraser, and I really appreciate his issue-based approach to the conversation. I want to first of all give an illustration of what was in Bill 10 quickly, so that we understand why it was rejected. part of the reason it was rejected was that this particular amendment emerged after the arrest of President HH. Some of the things that were being proposed, among others, had to do with the independence of the Electoral Commission, the issue relating to presidential petition, fundamental rights and freedoms of citizens, among others. And in Siavonga, political party representatives met there and agreed upon the content of the document. Then this particular process was supposed to have been presided over by the three church mother bodies. Along the way, it was hijacked by Zambia Center for Interparty Dialogue. And that is what caused problems. In addition to that, the content did not represent what was discussed in Siavonga. They changed. What did they include? Number one, they wanted to propose that under the circumstances, it is required that when one retires, they are retained on the payroll until such a time they are paid their dues. So they wanted to scrap off that provision. Meaning, we go back to 10 years, 15 years of an individual waiting for money without getting anything. Two, they wanted to amend the constitution so that they allow the president to divide the provinces without parliamentary approval. We said then they are killing the spirit and doctrine of separation of powers and checks and balances. Three, they wanted to allow the executive to borrow money without going to parliament. We were opposed to this. Four, they wanted to remove the clause, Zambia shall be a multi-religion, in the preamble and put Christian nation. We were opposed because we have other religions in Zambia and we are not a theocracy. It means that we are going to do away with other religions. Six, they wanted to amend Article 8 of the Constitution of Zambia, which provides for morality. And they wanted to add a word, because there's just the word morality. They wanted to add Christian morality. We were opposed because even within the Christian community, we do not have a collectively agreed upon definition of morality. For some churches, morality is about dressing. For some churches, you can dress anything, for long your heart is okay. For some churches, you can wear anything. For some churches, they allow polygamy. For some churches, polygamy is an issue of morality. So, we were opposed that it was going to cause chaos. The next thing, they wanted my brother. This is educative. It's a very important question. That's why I said it's a very important question. He has asked. It's important that we do due diligence to it. They wanted to make an amendment to the Constitution so that, contrary to the existing state of affairs for the House of Chiefs, which require that chairmanship for the House of Chiefs is rotational, they wanted it to be subjected to an open contest like the way we go for general elections. That was going to divide the country. We were opposed to that. The next point, they wanted to amend the Constitution from each state on the number of judges that sit at the Constitutional Court. They wanted to remove it from the Constitution as prescribed to relegate the powers to the National Assembly. The National Assembly is a creature of the Constitution. We have the Constitution as a supreme law of the land. So we were opposed that there is no way you can get one organ of the state which enjoys equal powers with the other organ of the state. You subject it to the other. So there were many other clauses that were bad. They also wanted to scrap off commissions. I'm sure you've heard of the Teaching Service Commission and all this. What that was going to cause was that the existing commissions exercise what is called delegated legislation. Now, the principle behind delegated legislation is that, or holds that, when powers have been delegated, they cannot be exercised by a person who has delegated such powers to another body or person. The person that should exercise that power is the person who has received the power to execute on behalf of the principal. Under the circumstances, the commissions that exist play an oversight role because the president is an elected figure. If we remove the commissions, our argument was that we were going to have the power in the president, unfettered powers to fire and hire whoever they thought. Right now, you can sue the president if there is procedural impropriety in your sacking as a civil servant. Even if the powers have been used arbitrarily or excessively by the president to fire you, you can contest the matter. That's why a group of officers, there were about 4 police officers, under Michael Sata, they were fired. Now, because there was procedural impropriety, they went to court and won the case. It means if we had gone ahead with butane. All these things were going to draw us backward. And then because the president that time wanted to subdivide provinces, he wanted to subdivide Western province by having Kaoma and other towns go together. He wanted to subdivide, because he was opposed. He had already succeeded with the northern province. You saw the battle that he had, may he so rest in peace, Michael Sata, with Mwinalubemba Chitimukuru. It was a vicious battle, such that there were views that they wanted to actually oust the traditional leader. They did not recognize Chitimukuru. They went and subdivided northern province. They wanted to do the same in other provinces. It was going to create chaos in the country. They wanted to subdivide even southern, to have the plateau and valley separate as separate provinces. They wanted to go further and subdivide northwestern. And the understanding is that where we are coming from, my brother, many of these particular boundaries have a traditional touch in terms of jurisdiction and control. Any attempt to go there was going to create a serious seed of discord among traditional leaders in terms of how much area they have to command and control. So there were many other areas of concern. The other thing that they wanted to do, they wanted ministers, lastly, they wanted ministers to remain in office after dissolution of parliament. Our argument was that they were going to give the ministers comparative advantage, knowing that they are also candidates in the next election, to use public properties to campaign. The reason for dissolving cabinet is to allow those people, if they want to contest, not to use public property. Okay. Now, all these things I've talked about are not in Bill 7. La Fraser, all these things I have talked about are not there in Bill 10. Yes, you talked about women living, women. You talked about youths and those who are disadvantaged by way of physical disability. Now, do you know, Bafreza, that the same people today are saying this issue of allowing women and youth to come in has already been taken care of by the Constitution? If that is the position, why did they attempt to include it in Bill 10? They included it in Bill 10, but they have come back to tell us something else, that the 2016 Constitution as amended, the Constitution as amended in 2016 has already taken care of this issue. If President HH was ready to include youths during the nomination, he could have included them. Now listen to this. The president cannot go beyond 8 because the provision is statute bound. Similarly, the provision that talks about appointments in public office should take into consideration women and so on. You will find it at the permanent secretary level. Count how many women are there. There are many. But again, we want to form strong institutions by putting in place express provisions that are instructive on the manner in which we are going to include youths in the National Assembly. So, by having 15 youths, we are not saying only 15 will be in parliament. Those are youths that are automatically going to be prescribed in the Constitution. But youths are free to contest openly, meaning the number of youths, if they won in an open contest, could be more than 15. Now, how did we arrive there? When you look at the number of people that are eligible to vote, they were around 27% or so. So that 15 represents the total number of members of parliament. If you go to women, the number of women eligible, you find that it's coming to about the same percentage. So they are using percentages. Then persons living with disabilities in the country, my brother, they are about 7%. They represent about 7% of the national population. So about 7% of the whole National Assembly seats is how they arrived on the number of persons that are supposed to be persons living with disabilities. So you can see that there was reasoning in arriving at certain decisions that were proposed. Again, you need to also know that democracy.
Okay, Bomusanje, you can go ahead.
Morning, Mr. Musanje.
So quickly.